say that the aircraft had just passed over me at least 1,000 feet. He kept asking if there was other traffic, flight traffic in the area, and they said they couldn't see anything. He asked if there was Air Force in the area. They said that there was none that they knew about. He said that it's coming back at him. There was a series of very disturbing back and forth between the air traffic controller and him until eventually there was silence on his end. Well, they flew out several P-4 Orion aircraft out of Australia, and they searched for this guy for 2 weeks, and his aircraft never found him, never found the aircraft, never found anything.
Yeah, and that's one that takes place fully in the air, it seems, and he's so professional and calm about the situation as he's trying to give details over the radio, but the last thing he says is, well, that strange aircraft is hovering over me again. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft. And then radio silence. It's like, what a scary thing to be your last sentence.
Yeah. No, and those documents all came from Australia. They were released by their aviation department. So it's all factual. And I would say it's pretty disturbing.
It is. And in that Land, Air, and Water book, you cover some areas that you do refer to as triangles. I mean, not maybe you, but they are referred to as triangles, much like the Bermuda Triangle. I guess there are other ones like the Alaska Triangle, a Great Lakes Triangle, even a Nevada Triangle, which apparently has had 2,000 crashes, many never found. And that's wild. We just don't hear about these other triangles. And of course, that kind of implies some kind of weird dimensional shift thing, because that's in the Bermuda Triangle lore. But I guess we're just talking about geographical areas where a triangle seems to be a cluster of sorts.
Exactly. And those names have been coined by other people for the mass amount of disappearances that have happened there. And it was worth addressing in the book, especially since there were many, many valid disappearances there.
Mm-hmm. Another thing you note in that book is, with all these cases, there's a significant statistical bump in 1948, 1949, and 1950, and you ask the question, is there a historical moment that caused the increase? And I would ask you, is there? I mean, it seems like that was a pretty potent time for a lot of things. What do you think that could be connected to?
You know, I threw it out there without me trying to push the audience one way or the other, and honest to God, I have had almost nobody respond to that question.
Huh.
And I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something. But, you know, other than Roswell, there really wasn't, to me, a lot of big worldly issues happening then that I could find.
Right. Well, Roswell is the big one, 1947. But, of course, 1947 is also the year of the Admiral Byrd story, which is always something I'm interested in, where he flies over the poles and he seems to see some unknown lands down there that don't match what you'd think the poles would show. And that's a strange thing. Also, 1947 is the creation of the CIA and I think a couple other related government agencies, and some people think that was a reaction to Roswell, perhaps, but I mean, 1947 is one of the most potent years to me ever for like strange or conspiratorial topics, and here you have this plopped down right there 3 years after, a statistical bump in missing people. I'd say there's some kind of thing connected there.
Interesting. I like it, Greg. Good.
Who knows? I mean, I don't have a lot of trust in the CIA compared to other law enforcement agencies or government agencies. They seem to be the one that's most sketchy, and they did form the year before the spike.
Right. That makes sense. That's good.
Yeah. Well, and also, I'm sure that people have given you all sorts of data, and I've seen a lot of people that try to take your work and your cluster map and lay it over other maps. What kind of maps have you seen juxtaposed with your clusters, and do any of them make sense to you?
I've seen probably 30 maps where people say, oh, this is an exact match. Honest to God, at least 30. And, you know, there's people said, oh, this is the Underground Railway map and this matches. Well, if there was some evidence that actually existed, not somebody's statement, but some evidence, I'd be paying attention. People have said, Bigfoot sightings map, UFO sightings map. Everything you can imagine has been thrown at me. And honestly, there's really been nothing that pegs it in my mind.
I would agree. There's too many things, too many cases. There's always going to be something where you look at a big cluster and say, well, what about that? There's nothing that matches that. So it is strange. The only overlay to the specific disappearances is wooded areas, there's no cities here. So maybe some predator has gotten wise and knows that it doesn't need to venture out to feed. But as we're starting to wrap this thing up, I guess I would ask, do you have any advice with all you know for people who are spending some time in the wilderness? Any tips for not finding ourselves in one of your books?
So the one commonality, and I haven't found this yet, it may exist, I have not read about it, and that is that nobody has disappeared carrying a firearm and a personal locator beacon. I have 2 cases where somebody disappeared carrying a personal locator beacon. That is, you can buy those on Amazon for about $200. You activate it, it sends a message to a satellite. Satellite sends a message to the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. Says, there's distress. They send a search and rescue team, and they can find you within 10 feet of that activation. I have told everybody that hikes needs to carry this. Why? Because if you're hiking off trail and you break your leg, there is the chance we will never find you. And so with a personal locator beacon, we will find you every time if you don't move. So carrying a gun and a personal locator beacon is a combination. I can't explain why no one's ever disappeared, but I haven't seen it. Always, always tell somebody where you're hiking and when you're going to be out. Contact that person when you're out. Check the weather before you go hiking. Always carry a hard copy map and a trail satellite map if you can. Always carry a couple energy bars and a couple of bottles of water. And the last thing is, this costs you like $5 or $6 if you go to REI or an outdoor store. An emergency blanket weighs about a pound, if that. Very light. It's bright orange. If you get stranded in the woods, if you hit bad weather, you can huddle up with this thing, keep you warm, and it's an excellent thing to wave if you're ever lost because it's so bright orange. But in the movie, Missing 411 The Hunted, we bring in some hunters and we talk about these safety aspects. And I think that's one of the best parts of the movie that I wish everybody would watch and really heed what's said, because I think it's important, and that's one angle in the movie that we wanted to make clear that we wanted to push. And right now, that movie, Missing 411 Hunted, is available for rent at iTunes, Amazon, almost every place online. If you go to our website, the Can-Am Missing Project, C-A-N as in Nancy, A-M as in Mary, Can-Am like Canadian American Project, you can buy even a DVD and read about all of our books, and you can purchase our books online there. Do not buy the books on Amazon. You'll get ripped off. Amazon wants 3 or 4 times what we'll charge for the book.
Right, and the authors get ripped off as well on Amazon.
Yes, sir.
And just in terms of having these things, it does seem like whatever is grabbing people has an ability to scan them or know what they have. And that's so creepy because they're hitting people with 100% accuracy, it seems. There's no cases of, I got grabbed, then my beacon went off, and then they found me, and here I am, and we caught the predator. It's like they seem to know what we have on us. They seem to be able to identify the technologies that people are carrying with them, and that's just a really creepy thing.
Very creepy. I wish I understood it more, but I don't. And, maybe if we talk in another 6-9 months, I'll have more information. Every book, every story, every disappearance I read about, I learned something. So you're getting the most current information out of me right now.
I love it. I love it. And in terms of taking the work further, since these cases have spanned almost the entire English-speaking world and Missing 411 has gotten so popular, are there any attempts to cross the language barrier and see if the vast landscapes of Russia or China or the jungles of Vietnam have these same disappearances?
My guess is they do. And there have been some people that were bilingual that have sent me translated documents. That door is starting to open.
Yes, I would love to see that because I do think sometimes our language and cultural barriers kind of keep our data sets tight into what we're familiar with. And this seems to be, as far as we can tell with the English speaking world, on every continent. So you got to assume it's in their world as well. And maybe there would be some added insights.
You'd hope so. But I do think you're correct. I think it's much more widespread than we understand.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, what's next for you? Are there plans on expanding beyond books and film?
It's a big task right now, just answering emails, phone calls, etc., about these missing cases. And people have said, oh, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? I am spread so thin right now, it's hard to explain for people to understand. I know that there's people out there that don't want to read books, and which is the reason we started to do the movies. And I'm very fortunate that my books all have 5-star reviews on Amazon. So if you want to go out and check if the book's worth reading, look at Amazon. And I'm very, very fortunate that this latest movie, I think we figured out the formula. I think that if we do another movie, it'll be along the same veins and the same style as this latest one, because I think people like this. So if we do another one, it'll probably be along the same genre.
Awesome. Yes, I've read maybe half of the 8 books at this point. They are all very thick. They're phone book thick, and they're just case after case. No wasted time. They're definitely great resource material. I can understand how even for you giving interviews, it's really easy to resource these things in the book because of the way you lay them out, the bibliography and glossary you have in the back. It's really great stuff. I mean, it is basically a case file in book format.
I tried to make it easy on everybody to kind of go through it, kind of like the way you would as a policeman. So there's not a lot of drama. There's not a lot of intrigue other than what is there. And in the stories themselves, there is, but I don't throw a lot of extra into it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's wise. So right on. Well, I really do appreciate your time, and I can't thank you enough for the work you do. So impressive. Of course, as you said, both films are available to rent or buy on most digital platforms. Is there anything else we should say in closing about following up with your work, getting in touch, anything like that?
The biggest thing is right now, I really wish that everybody out there would take a look at that movie, because I think that there is some trail safety guidelines and some stories out there that people would think, there isn't a story I've ever written about, Greg, where people thought it would happen to them. Yet every one of those cases, there's a victim and a victim's family that's living a nightmare. So if you have a night free, go onto one of those digital platforms. It only costs a few bucks right now to watch the movie, and I think you'd be impressed.
I agree. We definitely left a lot of details and a lot of cases from the film on the table for people to check out, because when you're doing an interview like this, you don't want to give away a full movie. Yet when you have 8 books with 100 cases each, it's easy to pull some cases out of there and go through them in minute detail. But there's definitely some things left on the table that I hope people check out. So huge thanks again. Keep up the great work and take care out there.
Hey, thanks a million, Greg.
Well, there is definitely something strange in the neighborhood, Higherside Chatters, and I am so happy we got David back to break it down with a long overdue update. And I field a lot of comments about it being time to have David back, and I don't disagree. I've asked a couple times, but when a person is in high demand, it's about catching them at the right moment, like when they have something new coming out. So the stars aligned, and I like to think we made the best of it. Of course, it's a little bit different to cover material from a film rather than a book, but we had a great return to form in the second hour where we could just outline some cases from the Land, Air, and Water book, including a lot of unconventional high strangeness cases, and maybe some that speak to more specific phenomenon than the bulk of the cases in David's work, which I think are still pretty mysterious and much harder to pin down. But as far as paranormal documentaries that I've seen lately go, Missing 411 Hunted is about as good as you can ask for. It's fresh, It's not a UFO doc. It's not a Bigfoot doc. And it's amazing to hear from people who were on the fringes of some of these cases, or the people who knew the missing victims and their take on this whole thing. It's really well done. And I feel so bad, actually, for the people affected by this. David obviously has a lot of empathy and sympathy for the victims in these cases, and we should too. It's not just juicy, paranormal, radio, missing people material. It's a real thing happening out there, or a couple of things. And it's damn scary, and there's a lot of very real fallout from whatever it is. But when it comes to talking about it, I like to think that I have a deeper understanding of certain things, like the nuances within paranormal categories, than I did the first time. Like the fact that maybe there aren't well-defined paranormal categories. But another would be the fact that a lot of indigenous cultures just have these areas in which they do not go, that they say are cursed or just contain a very bad mojo. They recognize it, they respect it, and they don't mess with it. Our culture doesn't have that reverence for unknown dangers of a spiritual nature, and maybe this is the result. If these are portal places of some kind, maybe they're not just open to one thing, but are actually exposed to a world of things. Maybe that could help us out with why so many of these cases are the same but different. Yeah, they check a lot of profile point boxes, but in ways that are too different to be the same thing. At least that's how I see them. Of course, we have the issue of these paranormal places conveniently being overlaid within national parks. And it's possible that we have a subconscious attunement to avoid these places. Maybe we have some sort of subtle magnetic repulsion that doesn't register to our conscious minds, and that is how, over time, these portal places become the last remaining wildernesses in an industrial society. Could be that. I also think the idea of an advanced predator is intriguing. Something that learned that if you hang out in these areas, the prey will come to you. But predators don't usually leave people behind to be found, alive or dead. Unless, again, it's some sort of predator of a spiritual nature, which I think is a very real thing that is a part of more cultures than it's missing from. It just happens to be missing from ours. The other thing that David brought up that I hadn't heard proposed before directly was a type of portal opening technology or testing of that sort of stuff in these areas. That really got the wheels turning for me. And it's not like that's David's conclusion, but sometimes I think we do look at government as a perpetrator for things that are really far older and deeper and embedded in our world in ways we just don't understand. Because that's actually a lot more terrifying than some CIA operation. And as for technology, if we did happen to be going into cursed areas, or America as an empire is dealing with some curse of the indigenous people, does that qualify as a technology? Indigenous technology, maybe. Magic is a natural technology as far as I'm concerned. So, I don't know, just something to consider. But I definitely appreciate David coming back again. I hope we don't go so long in between updates next time, but if you liked him being here, it's important to let him know, and that's true for all our guests, so that when they do have new material out, they know which shows have been the most impactful to them. They know which audiences are hungry for more. So don't be shy when it comes to that. And in Higherside news, a lot of people are aware that we just went through this crazy website overhaul, and it didn't go very smoothly, but the team has worked all week on correcting a laundry list of issues, and I can't think of any major problems related to the site migration that haven't been solved. And we have reached the promised land. I think you're going to love the new version of the HighersideChats.com. I'm trying to be not just one of the highest quality podcasts in the strange stuff conspiracy genre when it comes to the content, but I also want the website to be a top level website as well. And I've been doing this for pretty much 8 or 9 years, and some of the tools and plugins and systems that I started with were the only options at the time, and now the systems that a person can use to have something like extra content for paid subscribers, they're nearly endless. So I made some major upgrades to get us away from older systems and transferred to some that are newer, smoother, and better tools to be future resistant. I'd say future proof, but a show that talks about conspiracy is never future proof, it seems. But we had a few rough weeks making updates that will take us through many good years, and I think that's a worthy trade. I know some of our oldest and most passionate Plus members are having reoccurring access issues around the time that their payments come through, and I fix these manually for people when it happens, but for the long term, I think the developers I'm working with are all in consensus that the only thing that will really fix what these people are dealing with is for them to cancel the old subscription and sign up fresh in the new system. Not my favorite solution, but I think people can understand how sometimes older data just isn't apples to apples in a newer system. So if you're suffering from this issue, before you get charged again, maybe cancel and resubscribe if you don't mind. Talk to me about a little extra time for your trouble, but sometimes this just is what it is. Of course, I'm going to contact these people individually and help walk them through this process, but if you're technologically inclined and you don't mind making that change, it would be a huge help to both of us. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but the basic issue for these long-standing Plus members is that the old archaic system used to charge for a monthly subscription every 30 days, regardless of how many days were in a month. And the new system is smart enough to keep everything tied to the same date of each month. And of course, not every month has 30 days, so on months with 31 days, the new system looks for a charge, doesn't see one, and takes away access. And my developers could probably fix this, but it's a policy of the payment processor not to allow for a back-end change related to someone's billing cycle, and that's fair. You don't want to sign up for something that's monthly and then someone changes it to be weekly or daily, and that's not what you signed up for. So I get it ethically. Even though this is only a small, minor change, a change to a billing cycle is a change to a billing cycle, and I don't think we can do it. So we're going to have to go through that cancel, re-sign up process for that small category of people that are dealing with that issue. But what can you do? Like I said, the technology changes, new systems emerge, and I like to put the Plus money back into the business when I can, and that's what this whole thing was. I think it's easy to see the new site and infrastructure is a lot better and more professional, and now that our growing pains are pretty much behind us, come on in. The water is fine. Most listeners know that we keep the show operating at a high level and commercial free by releasing the first hour with no caveats or asks for donations or anything like that. And then, if you like what I do, we have an extended 2-hour version of all the interviews I do around here, and that is for Plus members who sign up for the low cost of $8 a month. It's simple, everyone's doing it, you understand. But I try to make sure I'm bringing you the best shows with the best guests I can, and that's my job. Not so bad, actually. But we did just have 2 great episodes, one with Nassim Haramein talking about his model for the reality we're in and the Hollow Earth, and then another with Recluse talking about his Jeffrey Epstein coverage, and we got 2 more coming out very soon, one about geomantic cities and the magical takeover of the ancient American landscape by the early founders. That's a bit of a mind blower. And we also have a health show based on the structured water work of Dr. Pollack and optimum hydration. So stick around, same bat time, same bat channel, and I'll see you later. Sign up for Plus at the Higherside Rent David's movie, Missing 411 Hunted, across all the digital platforms you know of. And I'm getting out of here. I've done my part. Your move, environmental entities, mysterious missing people makers, and the plethora of paranormal problems lurking in the darkness.